So it was a really different experience, and it was the exact opposite of what I wanted, which as a midwife and somebody who has strongly advocated for people with doing out-of-hospital birth. So this is my third baby. My other two babies were born out of the hospital. The one was born in the hospital, which the other two I was not a midwife, and this one I was a midwife. So I believe I got cursed. At 32 weeks, I was feeling some symptoms of preeclampsia, which can be headaches, visual disturbances. Sometimes people have upper right quadrant pain. I wasn't having that, but I was having enough symptoms that I was a little bit worried. And we can do labs at our birth center, but it takes a couple days to get them back. So I was like, let's go to the hospital. My mom agreed, let's go to the hospital. We checked my blood pressure and it was pretty high. And so we were like, yeah, let's go to the hospital, make sure that we can get these labs back in like an hour to see if I have preeclampsia or not, because it can be really dangerous really quick. I think my blood pressure was like 149 over 104 or something, which is not quite go to the hospital, you have preeclampsia, but it's like, that's high. So we went to the hospital thinking maybe I had preeclampsia at 32 weeks. And I think it was my liver enzymes that were high. And so they're like, we'll keep you overnight. We'll check a little bit more into this and see if you do have preeclampsia. And then the next morning, so I stayed there overnight. The next morning they checked my glucose levels. I hadn't eaten for like 10 hours probably, which that's a fasting glucose. So it would be about, for a normal person, like 70 to 110. Mine was almost 400. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, not gestational diabetes. Type 1 diabetes puts you at high risk. It puts your baby at high risk. So I had a whole home birth planned, and I kind of had to change my plans in that moment. So I still was kind of thinking like, okay, maybe if I still have 8 more weeks, maybe if I can keep my blood sugar perfect, I can still have home birth, which probably wasn't like the safest idea, but that was what I was telling myself in my brain. But because I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I was high risk. I had to go to MFM to get non-stress tests on my baby to make sure his heart was good, because it can affect a baby's heart when you have high blood sugars. So at about 34 weeks, I turned 34 weeks on Friday, and the following Monday I went to get a non-stress test for my baby, and again my blood pressure was really high. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this, they ruled out preeclampsia. It was not just type 1 diabetes, but it was type 1 diabetes, not preeclampsia. So my blood pressure was high at that NST, and they were worried about preeclampsia, and I told them I had just gotten checked for preeclampsia and I didn't have it like 2 weeks ago. And so I just kept telling them, like, I'm fine, my blood pressure is just high, it's normal for me. And they wanted to send me upstairs anyways, just to make sure for sure everything was fine. And I had both my kids with me, which normally when you have kids, they won't let you come in to see MFM because it's like high risk. And so they don't like you to bring other children unless they're above the age of 12. My kids are 9 and 5. And they just happened to let me go in that day, which thank goodness, because I did have preeclampsia and I had to get induced at 34 weeks. But because I had type 1 diabetes and preeclampsia and I was 34 weeks, I was hooked up to like every IV that you can think of. I think it was 7. Yeah, so I had just regular saline. I had magnesium sulfate because you can have seizures with preeclampsia. I had glucose for the diabetes if my blood sugar went low. I had insulin if my blood sugar went high. I had an antibiotic because I didn't know if I had GBS. And then I had Pitocin, and I feel like one other thing. Maybe only 6. I don't know, but I had a lot of things hooked up to me. So my plan of doing a home birth in my bathtub, I wanted her to deliver her brother and have all my friends, because it was my last baby, I wanted all my friends there and all my family and all my special people in my house. And I had a nice big bathroom that everybody could hang out in. And it was like a plan that had to completely change in that moment. And I called up a friend who is a doula, and I had my mom call. She brought little candles and just things to make it cute and special, even though it was in the hospital, because I was just kind of sad that I didn't get to do what I was planning on doing for the last 8 months. And so she brought everything. They put me on Pitocin. Well, they first started me on a Foley catheter, so they put it inside of your cervix, and then it helps open up your cervix to about a 4. Once you're dilated to a 4, that falls out, and then that's when they started Pitocin. And they started, I would say, maybe like 4 or 5 p.m. And my baby was born vaginally. I didn't have to get a C-section at 11:38 p.m. So it was about like 6 hours, a little over 6 hours. And he came out crying. He was super healthy. His APGAR, which is what we look at as a midwife, we would look at if they have good tone, if they have good color, if they're breathing well, if they're responding to touch. All those things are what an APGAR is. And he was like a 40-week baby. Like, he was totally healthy. For babies born at the hospital before 35 weeks, it's mandatory that they go to the NICU. So he did have to go to the NICU, but I was able to hold him for 5 minutes. So they let me do 5 minutes before we cut the cord, which normally they do like 60 seconds to cut the cord. And especially because he was so early, they didn't want me to even hold him at all. They wanted to just deliver him and take him. But I had told the doctor before, I was like, you're going to put him on my chest if he's crying, and I'm going to hold him as long as I can until you guys are like, okay, we really need to check on this baby. And that doctor was amazing, and he let me hold him for 5 minutes. And it was a very, very different experience from my previous births, which were both out of the hospital. No IVs, nothing going into my body that wasn't like string cheese and water. And so it was a really different experience, and it was the exact opposite of what I wanted, which, as a midwife and somebody who has strongly advocated for people with doing out of hospital birth, it was like I felt like fraud almost having a baby in the hospital. And so he's only 2.5 months, but I feel like at the beginning I cried like every day. Like, this was a horrible experience. Not that it was a horrible experience, but it wasn't what I wanted. So it felt like it was a horrible experience, but it was as good as it could have been for what it was. And I still got to have my mom there, and she got to film it. Oh, also, I forgot to mention because he was born before 35 weeks, I had to deliver him in the OR. So I couldn't have my kids in there. I could have my partner in there, and I could have one other support person because I didn't have an epidural. So they let me have a support person as my epidural, which normally they would only let you have one person, but they let that policy slide because I didn't have an epidural. So I was able to have my mom in there still, and I was still like the first one to touch him. Like, I was able to hold my hand down there and feel his head come out before the doctor delivered him. And the whole time I was kind of communicating with the doctor, and I had moved my hand for a minute, and the doctor was like, you can put your hand back down there, it's okay. I'm just gonna keep my hands here too. And he was really good about everything. He brought the candles, I brought the little like clip-on or flick-on candles, so they're battery powered. And I had those in the labor and delivery room, and he like put a bunch in his pocket when we went to the OR, and he like set them up for me. Aww. He gave my mom his speaker, the little OR speaker, and let her hook up music to the speaker, so I was able to listen to some calming music. And yeah, he was great. Everything was great, as great as it could have been. And now, 2.5 months later, I feel really good about the experience. I still wish that I would have had my home birth in my bathtub and had my daughter deliver her brother and all that stuff, but she got to go up to the NICU and meet him right after he was born and hold him. Yeah, she went up before I even went up there, so she got to go meet him and stuff, and it was really special. And he was only in the NICU for 10 days, which they told me he'd be in there probably until his due date, which would have been February 7th. and he was born on December 29th. But yeah, he was only in there for 10 days. They wanted to keep him longer. They kept telling me they were going to do all this random stuff. They're like, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. And I said, if he's not out of here by Friday, then I think I'm going to sign an against medical advice form and take him. And they were like, oh, hold on, don't do that. And then they went and changed a bunch of things, and they're like, okay, we probably get him out by Friday. And then we left Thursday. So yeah, they were just like trying to prolong it, I feel like. And I was like, the only thing we're waiting on is his eating, right? And they're like, yeah, that's pretty much, we just want to make sure he's eating this amount every 3 hours. Which now he's like fat. Like he eats like every 20 minutes. He eats all the time. I started working again already. I just do nails out of my house. And then I've done a couple prenatals. But I've had him take a couple bottles, and they'll be like 6-ounce bottles, and he'll just down it. And he's only 2 months old. Like, he is just the hungriest boy ever. But the diabetes is going well. I just got a pump yesterday, actually. And my blood sugar has been perfect all the last 24 hours. And the diabetes is being managed fairly well. I feel pretty good about it. I'm still producing some insulin, and with breastfeeding, a lot of times if my numbers go high and I breastfeed him, then they'll go back down to normal, which is really nice. I'm sure obviously that's going to change.
What questions do you guys have?
So being hooked up with everything, were you guys still able to do some comfort measures? Like,
that's the weird part, is that with my other kids, I really needed counter pressure on my back. I had like really bad back pain. This one, my mom tried it one time, and I was like, please don't touch me. I like didn't want anything. The only comfort measure that I had was squeezing my boyfriend's hand as hard as I could. Which, asking him after, he was like, you weren't really squeezing it that hard. But that's like what, like anytime he walked away, he like had walked away to, well, when they took me to the OR, he had to put like the little things on his feet and his hair and whatever. And I had a contraction, and I was like trying to find his hand. I was like, I don't care what you're doing right now, give me your hand. But that was the only thing I felt like I needed for that birth, which is weird because it was pretty bad considering I was on Pitocin, which my other ones I feel like I needed way more like outside help. But yeah, I don't know.
So you said that you delivered in the OR because he was before 35 weeks. Were you spending most of your labor in a room, and then they walked
so
you
literally they had checked me, and I was at a 6. Oh, they broke my water. I forgot to mention that part. But they checked me at a 6, and the doctor asked. He said, "Do you want me to break your water? We can if you want us to, but we don't have to." And he was like, "I think because you're a third-time mom, I don't think it's gonna harm anything. I think your baby's gonna come out as soon as we break your water." So at a 6, they broke my water, and then and I was still in the labor and delivery room at that moment. And then about, what would you say, 15, 20 minutes later?
Really fast.
We went into the OR, and then I had him like maybe 10 minutes after that. 5 minutes after. The birth video that my mom took is 7 minutes long. And I started pushing like 2 minutes into that video. I pushed him out in like a contraction and a half, maybe. He like just came right out. And it was funny because with my other ones, I feel like I was like more in control. Like, okay, I'm not having contraction, I can stop pushing. But with the Pitocin, I was like, she's just coming out. I can't help anything. Like, hopefully I don't tear, which I didn't. So that's good too. But I was like not in control at all of my body. The Pitocin was just pushing that baby out for me. But yeah, we were only in there for maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes. It was not a long time at all.
How did you stay sane with him in the NICU for those 10 days?
I just cried a lot, and I had a lot of people come visit and hang out with me, and I held him just the whole time. I would get there, and they knew. One of the nurses, she was like, she had mentioned something about, she was on the phone like outside of his little, they just put like a curtain over his little room area, and I heard her on the phone, and she's like, well, the mom at bed 53 or whatever bed it was, she was like, she's been at the bedside the whole time, she's not gonna leave, so if you want to come down here right now or tomorrow or whenever, she'll be here. And I was like, yeah. So I think just being with my baby the whole time, and then the last 2 days that I was there too, I slept. They gave me a sleep room so that I could, because we were worried about his feeding, I slept at the hospital in the sleep room, and the nurses called me every time he woke up, and I went and fed him. So that they didn't have to use like a feeding tube or anything like that. So it was nice that I got to be there. I would say I was there probably 90% of the time he was there. I'd go home and sleep maybe like 3 or 4 of the nights. But I'd pretty much just chill on the little chair next to him.
Okay, I have a question about the diabetes and the preeclampsia.
Mm-hmm.
But you were surprised that you were diagnosed with diabetes. Was that related at all to pregnancy, or was that something completely independent?
So obviously there's gestational diabetes, which is what I thought it was at first, because I refused the gestational diabetes test because I didn't get it with my other 2 kids, and the likelihood of me having it with no other like symptoms, I guess, was like 7%. Right? And so I was like, 7% is a good enough percent that I don't really care. So I didn't check or anything to see if I had gestational diabetes. So at first I thought I might have just gestational, and then once they looked at the numbers, they're like, no, it's not. And then I asked more questions about it after that, because I was like, how did that happen? Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. So I always thought it was like something you could only get as a child, or something you got if you ate too much sugar. Like that's the stigma around it. But now I know it's an autoimmune disorder. Anybody can get it at any age. And it can be caused by pregnancy because your immune system is suppressed, and also pregnancy makes it harder for your body to produce insulin. You're more resistant to insulin. You could get a common cold and end up getting diabetes. You could get the flu, which I had the flu like right after I got diagnosed. And then like 2 weeks before that, I had gotten a little bit sick too. And so it could have been that. But your A1C checks your blood sugar levels for the last 3 months, and it was really, really high. So it had been at least for 3 months. It could have been before pregnancy. But as far as we know, it was for sure the last 3 months before I was diagnosed, but we don't know anything before that.
But there's nothing you can do to like prevent it?
No.
Like it just happens?
Yeah, there's nothing. Like with type 2 diabetes, it's more, you can change your lifestyle, eat better, be active, and you can go into remission with type 2 diabetes and not have to really worry about it. But with type 1, it's like there's nothing you can do. Like I could have eaten better than anyone else in the entire world and so healthy and no carbs at all, or just the perfect amount of carbs, and I still would have gotten it. So we don't really know why it happened. I don't have anyone in my family who has it. So I'm just the unique, lucky one, I guess. But then as far as the preeclampsia, a lot of times people with type 1 diagnoses will develop preeclampsia because it harms your organs and things like that. And preeclampsia also harms your organs. So that's probably why I got it, but also my family has a history of preeclampsia. So it could have just been because my family has a history of that. So who knows?
So with you getting induced, once you found out you had preeclampsia, is that the standard, like that always happens?
Yeah, if you are before, I believe if you're before 34 weeks, they'll just keep you in the hospital and like monitor it really well. But if you're, because I was 34 and 3 or something, they felt comfortable inducing me. So if you're 34, 35, 36, anything after that, they'll just probably induce you right on the spot is usually what they'll do.
Yep, also depending on severity.
Yeah, mine was on my chart. It said severe preeclampsia, so, which is crazy because 2 weeks before I got tested for it and I didn't have it.
Jesus.
So it developed very, very quickly, severely, very quickly, which is kind of crazy. I did have some signs of preeclampsia with her as well, but I was 40 weeks in 1 day. So we just induced me at 40 weeks in 1 day. Well, we didn't even induce me. We just did like some sweep and stretches, and she came out the next day. So.
What's your favorite thing about this birth?
Honestly, I don't know if I really could say I liked any part of it. I'm not like traumatized by it, but I'm not happy with it at all. I would say, I mean, I'm just happy that I had both of my kids there for majority of the time, and then as soon as the baby was born and he was taken to the NICU, I got to come back and my other kids came back in the room. So I was happy that I got to be there. But with my second, with his birth, she got to be there and like be my little doula and push on my back and get really excited when he was born and be right next to me. And so it sucked that I couldn't have that, because that's what I wanted this time too, but with both of them. So I kind of...
What advice would you give to women if they have to switch their plan?
I mean, it's hard to give people advice because I know everybody handles things differently, but I think just letting yourself feel the sadness of having to change your experience, because if you feel it, then I think it's easier to accept it and then move on.
Oh, is
That's
that the
my
baby?
baby.
There he is.
Come in.
That's the baby.
Thanks,
I was
Ivey.
just talking about you. I was just talking about you. Do you want to say hi to everyone? Oh, I'm sorry.
Ivy, thanks for telling your story.
Of course, thank you.